Welcome everybody to the 30th episode of Business Insights on the 7th of December 2020, our penultimate episode for this year. Business Insights is a very exciting webinar series hosted weekly on Mondays by a panel of industry thought leaders for business owners who simply want to be in the know about the latest and most significant news and initiatives in the Australian business landscape that impact how they do business. Our panel of advisors aim to inform, educate, and provide strategic insights to the changes in the economic, legislative, and financial landscape that affects small business. We aim to guide our viewers to navigate business challenges through COVID-19 and beyond. Let's now meet our panel of industry thought leaders for this week. Starting with Mr. Adam Lyle from BizDoctor.
Hi, Sam. Thank you.
Great to have you on. Mr. Ian McLaughlin from Imperium Accounting and Tax.
Hi, Sam. Very glad to be here today.
Great to have you on board. And Bernard Tourmay from MGA Insurance.
Hi, Sam. Good afternoon, panelists.
Our resident HR specialist, Lisa, is having a well-earned rest today. And my name is Sam Gratian from Money Pit Private Club. I should also provide the following general warning. The views and opinions shared on this webinar are designed to be general information only, not designed to be taken as specific advice for your personal or specific circumstances. Feel free to reach out to any of the panel members for specific advice to meet your requirements. Now, let's get started. First off, I'm going to go up to you, Adam. Adam, there's quite a bit of stuff happening in your world of business. Please update us.
Thanks, Sam. Look, I'm going to be Captain Blunt today. Some guy held a press conference during this week, not quite sure what planet he's on. He comes out and he says, the recession is over. Really? All right, let's talk about our audience. Our audience is the SME, the small to medium enterprises. That's basically the majority of our thousands of viewers every week. I have not had one person who have come to me in this last week and said, yeah, mate, the recession was over months ago. What are you talking about? Not one. And I'd like to put this challenge out to our viewers. Can anyone please click on the link here, give us feedback, email me, send a pigeon and tell me that the Treasurer was right. Now, technically speaking, he's right. And I'm going to eat my humble words and I'm going to admit here online today, my prediction of us going into a depression is more than likely going to be wrong. All right, hand on heart, I'll admit that. But if we think just for a moment that the world is a better place because of a few basis points here and a few checks and balances here and over there, and the world is rosy, we are kidding ourselves. We are seriously in trouble. My point with this is, please, for the love of God, get some external advice and make sure that your business is okay. Because if you are going to believe what is being said on the TV, it's the closest thing to fake news I've ever seen in my life. And we're not even in America. I'm sorry to be Captain Blunt. Now, last week, we made a promise to talk about director loans. I'm going to give you one perspective over here, and then our illustrious new dad is going to give you another perspective of Division S 7A loans. My perspective is this. If your business is going well and everything's hunky-dory and everything's fine and all your bills are paid and the tax is all under control and everyone super's all paid up, knock yourself out. You're putting your blood, sweat and tears into the business, make some money, take some money. Absolutely. But if you are in the environment where you're playing, you know, Captain Circus and you're juggling balls and you're trying to rob Peter to pay Paul, that's not the environment where you need to complicate things further with transactions going in and out to a director. And I'll tell you why. In this current environment, let's just assume the worst happens. in 6 months' time, someone makes a decision, says, no, pull stumps, not going to supply you any of that stuff anymore, and you lose your contract. And then that person who you lost the contract with because they had to remedy that sues you, and you can't afford to pay that. And as a result, the advice at the time is that your company is restructured and you place the entity that you're in into some kind of external administration, i.e. a voluntary administration or a liquidation, or you actually use the new provisions that are before Parliament now and you do the Chapter 11 process. I can almost guarantee you that the person who's administering that particular administration, that the liquidator or the administrator or the Chapter 11 process, has to look back at the transactions that you entered into with the company, and if it's in favour of you, you're going to have to pay it back. The liquidator's going to come back to you and say, sorry, buddy, don't care that you put your blood, sweat and tears into this thing. I want the money back. There are already provisions in the Corporations Act to allow that to happen. I'm not going to bore you with all the detail, but Section 588 FDA of the Corporations Act says that any transaction that's entered into in the 2 years preceding a liquidation that is not in favour of the company can be clawed back by a liquidator. Full stop. No, there's not even a test. You don't have to prove insolvency. You don't have to prove anything. Did the transaction happen? Yes or no? So that's the biggest risk that directors have when they're transacting with the company in that loan environment. Now, that's basically the risk that I wanted to cover. The actual construct and the qualification for 7A loans, Division 7A loans, I'm going to pass the ball to Ian McLaughlin.
Thanks, Adam. So I thought what I might do is just give a bit of a brief background of Division 7A and make it quite simple to understand. So the best way to think about it is this. What are the three most common ways that someone, a director, shareholder, associate of that shareholder, can get money out of a company? Well, the first one would be a wage. The second one would be a dividend. And then the third most common one would be a loan. So when you look at those first two, being the dividend and the wage, they're taxable. They go into the individual's tax return, they're going to be taxed. The loans aren't. So what the ATO did was, and these provisions came in on the 4th of December, 1997, they said, right, any unpaid amounts to a shareholder or their associate, we're going to deem those as unfranked dividends in that individual's tax return. So what can you do to get around this? The loan needs to be on commercial loan term agreements with a proper loan contract drawn up. And it can be over two different terms. So you can have an unsecured loan over 7 years, and the loan needs to be repaid back within those 7 years. Or you can have a secured loan over 25 years, which has to be secured against real property. And the value of the property has to be 110%. So the LVR is about 90%, in other words. And you need to charge interest on the loan at the ATO prescribed benchmark interest rate, which this year is 4.52 for the 2021 year. So you look at that, that's quite high. When you listen to Sam, he'll talk about interest rates, and that's quite pretty much double the interest rates that he's been talking about over the course of this year. For the 2020 year, the benchmark interest rate was 5.37. So there's a couple of things with that. Which transactions are not included or would be treated as dividends? So a pre-December 4, 1997 loan, or a loan that has been repaid by 30 June of that year. A loan to a company. So company to company loans are okay. They're not caught under Division 7A. And then obviously the one that I mentioned, a loan made in the ordinary course of business on commercial terms. So the loan agreement needs to be drawn up and it needs to be signed off by the date of lodgement of that company's tax return for that year. So let's say for the sake of the argument that the 30 June 2020 return is due on the 15th of May 2021, then that is when the loan agreement needs to be entered into. So that basically will avoid you then of having to put that amount in your tax return as an unfranked dividend. And the ATO can and do audits, and this is a very, it's an anti-avoidance measure really, and it's an area in their office which is, they're always on the lookout for it. So you need to really comply with these requirements of putting those loans on the commercial loan agreement. So did you, before I go on about anything else, Adam, did you want to mention anything else there about Division 7A?
No, I think that's right. Obviously it's right, but what I'm saying is that gives everyone both the reason of why you would want to make sure you're aware of it and the risk. And that's the big thing, is what you and I wanted to cover this week.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, to avoid the risk of having that amount put in your tax return as a unfranked dividend, put on a commercial loan agreement and make sure it's done correctly and signed off by the correct date. So just another couple of bits of information from me today. So what are we now? 7th of December. So the JobKeeper declarations for the month of November will close on the 14th of December. The ATO has said for the month of the December declarations, which are going to be due in January, they're going to keep those open until the end of the month. So normally it's the 14th, but they're going to keep January open until the end of January. So that you have till the end of January to make those December declarations with the ATO. So that's it for me today, Sam. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Adam and Ian. A very insightful information. Division 7A is a very topical item for all business owners in particular. So to have it covered off is great. Thank you. Let's go over to Bernie at MGA. And Bernie, what insurance updates do you have for us today?
Thanks, Sammy, and Ian, Adam, great advice, and I'm sure it's something that a lot of SME businesses can relate to. So great advice, boys. What I wanted to speak to you guys about today, and I guess the audience, was the current market that we're in at the moment and the difference between, I guess, a soft and hard market. So, the insurance market is cyclical. It moves through what we call a hard and soft market. A soft market generally can be characterized by low rates, high limits, and readily available insurance cover. In a hard market, premiums increase, capacity will generally decrease, and this can be caused by a fair few reasons. So it could be, the falling investment returns or low interest rates. It could be the increase of the frequency or severity of losses or bad claims performance on portfolios, reduced capacity, cost of reinsurance, and generally regulatory intervention. So what we're going through at the moment is a very hard market, and this can all obviously be identified by some of the stuff that's I've noted previously. At the moment, so these are some of the headlines. One of the insurance headlines at the moment on insurancenews.com is industry profits fall as COVID, natural disasters dent earnings. So bushfires and other natural disasters from last summer to early January, as well as COVID-19, put a lot of pressure on financial markets. So APRA's latest prudential update shows that the industry has recorded an annual fall of profits by 73.3% after tax to 900 million for the year ending in September, and a 2.8% decline on a quarterly basis to 836 million during the 3 months to September. This again was due to the poor performance in claims, and again the poor, returns and how the markets are performing at the moment. So what we are seeing though is an increase in premiums. So what we're seeing is 9.8 billion this year increase in domestic premiums, households, and 9.3 billion last year. So there is an increase in premiums that have been collected. But obviously what this means for SME businesses and a lot of mums and dads is that insurance premiums are going up to cover the losses, and insurers aren't making enough money at the moment. So what my advice is to all business owners is you need to work closely with your insurance advisor to make sure that you understand what's impacting the increase in these premiums. You need to make sure that you're in a position where your insurance advisor can position your risk to make it as attractive as possible to insurers. Another update, basically, as I've spoken about in previous weeks, obviously there's decision around business interruption and how that will be impacted on the court's decision. Hasn't been finalised yet in terms of whether the insurers are going to appeal or not. It has impacted, obviously, the insurers' forecasted earnings and profits. Insurers are concerned. A lot of insurers are doing an approach, a combined approach. So make sure you speak to your insurance advisors to see what your insurers is doing in relation to business interruption claims, and make sure you position yourself. Although the courts ruled that insurers can't rely on the 1908 Act, there are still plenty of other clauses that the insurers will rely on to try and decline your claim. So we need to make sure that you're working with your insurance advisors to make sure that you can trigger a business interruption claim. And that's all for me this week, gents.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Bernie. The great update as well from you. Obviously, I encourage you viewers to engage with any of our panel members if you've got any questions related to the specific topics being talked about today. On to myself, I'll cover off on interest rates and markets. Rates in interest rates have been pretty steady this week versus other weeks. The most competitive rates remaining that 2 to 4 year sub 2% fixed rates for owner-occupier properties, principal and interest repayments. However, I have just seen a couple of banks who are just starting to offer slightly lower investment rates as part of the market share growth. These are in the range of 2.69% per annum and going upwards from that. Now, the 2.69%-ish, you could say that it's similar to some owner-occupier rates that have been offered by some banks. So it's interesting to see how market forces are making some changes in the banks in particular. I guess whilst I'm on this, I often get asked about when is the right time to get a better pricing from the bank. Well, basically, banks are either in profit drive mode, where they have no interest in price competition, or they're in a market share drive mode, where they will give better discounts. And they do switch between those often, even within the same week, which is why your credit advisor, your broker, can assist in working out if the bank will be responsive on the pricing front. I should also say that just because there's lots of noise around the market, refinancing may not be the most appropriate option for you. Maybe going back to the bank and getting your broker to get pricing for you might be just as effective and obviously less costly for you as well, and less inconvenient for you. So certainly the run to the Christmas will be pretty hard with renewed interest in the property market. At the moment, we've got pretty strong auction results in place. Over the weekend, we had Sydney at 80% and Melbourne at 74%, well above what it was this time last year. And of course, the combination of strong local demand, low interest rates, and easing of some of these lending policies is helping in this regard. And I guess that is really offsetting that lower immigration, weak rental markets, higher unemployment, and even in some areas underemployment today. So quite an interesting melting pot of information and how things are actually transpiring right now, which is very different. Onto the markets. Markets had yet another solid week, rising by 0.5% to continue the current strength in the share price recovery. I should say, though, that not all shares are necessarily recovering, so selectiveness is still very necessary. Last week, we talked about the time in the market, and I wanted to just basically go back and cover that off this week in a concept called dollar cost averaging. And this is where you invest in the same amount of money in the investments you have monthly. Therefore, in some higher months, you will buy a slightly lower number of units, but in lower months, you'll buy slightly higher units of investment. The impact of this is that basically you will have a better overall average weighted cost, and of course, somewhat de-risking you. Now, of course, you can buy everything on a particular day, but it's always hard to say whether that day was the best day to buy or not until that time has actually And there's been some studies also in terms of the time in the market and timing in the market. And one is, what if you sell everything in the down days and then buy back later? The trouble is you can never really finesse those times perfectly. And you can lose returns just because of the fact that you can't do that. And so courtesy of Fidelity, I have a chart that might demonstrate that for you a little bit better. And I will just share that with you momentarily. And what we have there is essentially a system whereby by losing your best days, and you will have essentially 40% less return just because you do that, which is an amazing amount of, you'll be able to see that coming through shortly, which is an amazing amount of lost opportunity. So this is the Aussie shares since 2004. If you invested $10,000 and you remain invested across everything that has happened across all that time, including what's happened with the world, what's happened with the pandemic, etc., versus you deciding to be out on certain days and you essentially miss the best 10 days. The difference is you make $15,700 less. So that goes to show that very much time in the market is a better option than timing the market. And I'm certainly subscribing to that. Now, that's not to say that you won't decide your timing of, say, adding a large lump sum of money. Obviously, you need to do that when you're comfortable and you have the appetite for investing. But overall, remaining invested with what you have in the market is the more prudent approach for the long term. Now, next week, being our last week also, I'll be covering off on some Christmas tips and discussing not to set a New Year's resolution financially, which is probably a bit different than what you would have thought. With that, I'm just going to throw it to the panel if there's any questions.
Bernard, I have a question for you. Maybe if you could have a think about covering it in either next week or in January when we return about key man insurance. It's something that has come up this week with someone who had a heart attack within a business, and of course they've now had to go to the expense of getting a replacement person to manage the business while they're away, but of course they weren't insured. So just the benefits of why people would want to look at key man insurance.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Happy to cover that off next week.
Yeah, very, very good topic to cover off there. Anything else from the panel?
Sam, I've just found something interesting that just come through this morning. And basically, do you remember last year how the government wanted to ban the $10,000 cash payments from businesses? So it looks like that's basically been squashed in the Senate. So it looks like that's not going to go ahead. And they're just saying the change in sentiment, obviously, because of what's been going on in the economy.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so obviously don't forget to check out us on Facebook and LinkedIn at Business Insights. You will see this recording on YouTube channel also. We'll happily answer any questions you have about what we cover up in these sessions in the chat area down below. And so please do make sure that you engage with the panels. And we have a very, very much an experienced panel of experts that can help you in very much navigating what's been going on over recent times. Now, reminder that next week is our last webinar for the year. We will return back on the 18th of January after next week. And we will aim to post some Facebook and LinkedIn in the mediums during that period of time as well. Of course, if you like what you see or hear, do share us with your friends, family, and colleagues. And obviously, till next time, we'll catch up with you again. And to just finish it off, I normally finish off with a quote. We're going to have a nice little quote from none other than Dr. Seuss this week. What if Christmas doesn't come from a store? What if Christmas perhaps means a little bit more? We certainly hope that you're ending this year in a much more joyful way than what we've had to endure during it, and you're being positioned for a great 2021. Until next week, have a wonderful week.